Our interview this morning is with Merle Wadsworth. Merle was born in Seward, Pennsylvania in April of 1933. He served in the United States Air Force from April of 1952 through October of 1978. He served in Korea and Vietnam. His highest rank attained was E8, Senior Master Sergeant. This interview was conducted at Burleson, Texas on Tuesday, November the 15th, 2016. My name is Dale Dexheimer. I'm not related to Merle in any way. Also in the room is Milton Gibson, who is our videographer. This interview was conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress and also Operation Remember. And with that little intro, Merle, you can tell us about your time in the Air Force.
Okay. When I graduated from high school, I got a job, but I was classified 1A. And my cousin was in Korea, and he kept telling me, don't get in the Army, get in the Air Force or someplace. So I enlisted in the Air Force with two buddies of mine and was sent to Sampson Air Force Base, New York for basic training. After basic training, I was sent to Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi for radio operator school. That consisted of learning Morse code, which was the hardest part of the school. After I completed that, they put me in what they called intercept school for another couple of months. And then they put me on a boat and sent me to Japan. Spent 22 days at sea. Was glad to get to Japan. And then they shipped me to Korea. Was in Korea about 2 months, and they needed people in the Philippines, so I was volunteered. I didn't volunteer, they volunteered me. So I went to the Philippines for 3 years, working as an intercept operator in a classified setting and a lot of classified material. I made Airman third class when I graduated from basic. I made Airman second class when I graduated from radio school. And then from Philippines, I was sent to Otis Air Force Base, Massachusetts, who told me when I got there that they couldn't use me because I didn't have the right AFSC, Air Force Specialty Code. But they put me in ground radio, which I worked ground radio for the base, the command post, and from the aircraft that we sent out. They were flying radar stations, is what they were. So I worked that for a short time, and I talked my way into being an airborne radio operator. And did that for 4 years, over 4,000 hours of flight time. And made staff sergeant in the process. And then they decided I needed more education, so they sent me back to Keesler Air Force Base to be a tech controller. That job entailed checking all lines and equipment coming onto an Air Force base. After graduating from that school, they sent me to Ernest Harmon Air Force Base in Newfoundland. I spent 2.5 years there working as a tech controller. And then they transferred me to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia. Spent my 10 months there and went back to the Philippines for 3 years in what they call the first MOB, the first Mobile Comm Group. We went to Vietnam TDY to install and maintain and operate equipment for the spare strips they opened up in Vietnam. So I got to see quite a bit of it. I saw Da Nang, Cam Bay, everything around Saigon, and also got to see northern Thailand, Udor in Thailand. And that tour I made tech sergeant, E6. From there they sent me back to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia as NCOIC of the Tech Control, the TAC headquarters, Tactical Air Command. From Tactical Air Command, I went to Ottawa, Canada, Defense Communications Agency. We were supposed to be there 4 years. After a year, they closed the place down and shipped me to Sacramento, California, to McClellan Air Force Base. And they put me in a new environment when they put me in a computerized communications center. So I had to learn that, along with going to school back at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey for 2 months, and several other TDYs out of there. When I left there, they transferred me to Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii. So I spent 4 years there as shift supervisor for a while, and then when I made E8, I made Master Sergeant when I was in Ottawa, Canada. And then in California, I made E8. I was a systems NCO for this tech control there, which installed all lines and equipment was coming in, checked them. From there, I figured I'd go to Vietnam since I'd never been on a remote assignment. They sent me to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland. I spent my 10 months there as superintendent of tech control and then as superintendent of the audit in tech control. From that assignment, they sent me back to the Philippines. Took over 4 tech controls at Clark Air Base in the Philippines as superintendent. Spent my 2.5 years there, and they sent me back to headquarters, Air Force Communications Command, which was a terrible assignment. But anyway, I put a year in there and I retired in October 1978. After I retired, I worked for Codex Corporation for a short time as on a contract with the military, who sent me back to the Philippines again. So my mother got sick and I couldn't stay there. I had to go back to see her, so they gave me a leave of absence. I went back. Well, while I was there, I found out they needed my specialty at Johnson Space Center. So I called them and they hired me on the spot. And I was superintendent of communications section down there for the rest of the time I was down there. Helped launch 34 shuttles, provided all the communications, TV, everything else from it, data. And I retired from there in 1991, April 91. And since then I lived in Utah for 10 years, came back to Texas in 2001, and I'm still here. That about covers my life anyway.
Well, I would tell you, Merle, that Milton and I have done a number of these interviews, and I don't think we've talked to anybody who's had as many duty stations as you have
16 permanent change of duty stations.
in 26 years. And somewhere along the line there, you found time to get married?
Yes.
Where'd you get married?
I married a young lady from the Philippines.
Okay, while you were over there.
Yeah.
And most of your time in the Philippines, I guess, was at Clark?
Yes. All of it
Okay.
was at Clark.
Okay. Well, let's go back to Seward, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. You graduated
1951.
in 1951 while Korea was going on. Were smart enough you didn't want to be a ground pounder, so you went in the Air Force. What'd your family do in Seward?
My dad worked for Pennsylvania Electric Company. He was an electrical equipment repairman. And he farmed at the same time.
So you've got all those little electrons or something running in your veins.
More or less.
Okay. You learned Morse code. You still tap out a little
I can still
Morse?
remember it.
Okay. Okay.
Be with me forever, I guess.
You went through a lot of things, by golly. It's tough to keep up with your career. An airborne radio operator.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
supplied the communications for a flying radar station is what I did.
okay, what kind of airplane was that?
RT-121 Super Connie.
Wow, you do go back a few years, don't you? The capabilities, you were radio communication or you were radar?
Radio.
Radio, okay.
I made sure they had communications with ground station to relay their tracks to them. If they couldn't get it through that way, I sent it CW to our ground station on the base, and they relayed it to the sites.
So, that was flying out of Clark
No, flying out of Otis Air Force Base.
in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
which is no longer there, I guess? Is it?
I think it's still there, but
Is it?
I think it's a joint base of some kind now. Like it
Okay,
goes
kind of
on.
like Carswell.
Yeah.
Okay. So how long was that flight? If
It lasted anywhere from 15 to 24 hours.
Did
Most
you read?
flights were around 15 hours. It was on station. We flew 500 miles off the coast of the East Coast of the United States, from way up north to way down south.
it was before the days of refueling, so you just got out there on station and flew
We
big
flew
circles?
out at 2,000 feet to conserve fuel, and we climbed to 7,000 feet. It was the best altitude for conserving fuel.
Wow.
So if there was a storm out there, we flew back and forth and through it for 8 hours or whatever.
So it was a bumpy ride, some days.
A lot of times it was a very bumpy ride.
You ever have damage to the airplane?
We lost the radome one time.
Just ripped it off?
It just fell off on the way back. We picked up airspeed all fast, and the aircraft commander called me and said, would you look through, we had a little bubble thing behind the radio position. You could check the bottom of the aircraft. And he said, would you look and see if you can see the radome? And I looked and there wasn't one there.
How many guys would you have on that Super Connie?
Anywhere from 15 to 25, it all depended. We had a lot of visitors from the Pentagon come up there to get
Okay.
their flight time. They flew with us.
If you had 25 folks in that airplane, you were kind of packed in there, I guess, weren't you?
Pretty much so, yeah.
So you would sit at your duty station doing whatever, and you might have a guy from the Pentagon right on your elbow?
Well, they did sit around. The navigator was right across the aisle from me. I was over the wings. If I was on the left wing, he was on the right wing. And they'd come back and sit with him and talk to him. And they didn't talk to me much because I had a headset, so I didn't want to hear what they were saying anyway. But we had bunks in the aircraft, but I never slept much in one of them.
All these duty stations, actually, you spent a lot of time in the Philippines.
Yes.
And obviously, you're pretty close to folks in the Philippines. You married a lady
Mm-hmm.
from the Philippines. You speak any of the language?
No, I tried to learn the language one time, and I found out that we went from one province to the next, it was different. And I learned a lot. I learned where I could understand what they were talking about. That was about it.
When you went to Clark the first time,
Mm-hmm.
what year was that the first time you went to Clark?
1953.
53. So were you still flying B-29s or 50s?
No.
No?
I wasn't a radio operator. That was an intercept operator at that time.
Okay. But what were they flying out of Clark at that time?
B-36s landed in there a couple of times while I was there.
Okay. And when's the last time you were in the Philippines?
1976.
And you were flying, they were flying B-52s at that time, I
Yeah.
guess. Quite a transition in those years.
Quite a difference. The reason I transferred so many times was in my career field, they used a lot of us overseas, but they used very few in the States. So it's mostly 3 years over, back for a year or 10 months and back over again someplace. That's the way it worked. That's why when I got overseas, I stayed as long as I could because I knew I was going to be back for 10 months and be go someplace else.
When you lived outside of the United States, you live on base or do you live off base?
Both.
Both?
Most of the time when I went to the Philippines, I had to live off base for a while and then I'd move in.
You had to, you had to live off base because the base housing was not available?
That's right.
So give me a little bit about your experience. Obviously, you got married, so you must have had some social life in the Philippines.
Oh, yeah.
You shopped at Philippine grocery stores?
No.
No?
Shopped at the BX commissary.
Okay. Carted everything off base.
Even
Okay.
water. Had to cart water off base.
And that was because maybe the water in the Philippines was a little shaky?
Very shaky.
Okay.
They told us don't drink it.
Did they have, were there guerrillas, communist insurgents, whatever?
Yeah, yeah. We went back to base one night before curfew when I was over there the first time. And they were shooting up the main gate, so they sent us back to town till it was over with.
This is terrorists or guerrillas or whatever you would call them at the time?
Hucks, that's what they call them, they're Hucks.
I'm sorry?
H-U-K-S, Hucks.
Okay. And I guess they've pretty much got that straightened out by now?
No, I don't think so.
Don't
Well,
think
they
so?
might around there, I don't know, but down south they have a lot of trouble. Mindanao in that area.
You spent some time in Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a difference from the Philippines.
Very different. That's what they used to do to me, send me to the Philippines and backstage 10 months and again.
So you had it was a short stay in Newfoundland?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. What were the winters like?
Cold,
Cold.
snowy, lots of snow.
Were you in some airborne operation or were you on the ground there?
I was on the ground.
On the ground. Okay.
Tech controller working communications circuit.
Give me a typical day when you were in Newfoundland.
Well, we worked shift work, so we was going in there all hours of the day and night. I remember one night I had mid shift. I got to the gate and they told me I couldn't go in because the base was closed. I said I have to go to work, and by that time there was cars parking behind me. And their police said, well, if you can get 6 cars in a row, I'll let you go in. So we got 6 cars. We went, and you couldn't see anything. I mean, you drove by the street lights, looking up, not looking ahead of you.
Because of the weather?
Blowing snow and stuff. And we got in there, and I got a parking place right in front of the building. And the guy that worked with me, he had to park across the street by a dumpster. We had to dig his car out the next morning. But every morning, you more or less beat the snow off him around the fan so he could turn, and then you got lived in a house trailer up there.
A military house trailer?
No,
No? Oh, civilian. You lived off base?
yes, I had to buy
Okay.
one. No place to buy for rent hardly up there.
Did, well, I guess the government paid for that or subsidized it?
We did at first when I first got up there, and then they quit doing it. They gave us a pay raise, and then they cut that out, so we lost money.
So the people that owned the housing could charge you whatever they thought was...
Whatever they wanted, whatever they could get. And they were terrible houses too, I want to tell you.
Little drafty in the winter?
A little drafty. And one guy lived in one, he said he didn't have a fan, he said he didn't need one because the wind blew the heat across the room.
Did did you fish or hunt or do something when you were in Newfoundland?
Hunted moose, and did a lot of fishing. Good fishing up there. The NCO club had a boat they took you out on to go fishing, which was nice.
So you fished in the North Atlantic, I guess, or the St. Lawrence, whatever it would be?
Well,
Or did you fish
fished
inland?
in a bay they come into, close
Okay.
to Harmon Air Force Base. In fact, one day I went home for lunch and my wife says, an airplane just crashed. And I said, what? And I looked out and all I see was smoke up. And they never found him, even in that water. Cold water, I want to tell you. I didn't want to swim in it, I'll tell you.
But it was good fishing.
Good fishing.
Okay. Ottawa. You spent some time in Ottawa. Was that a little more spit and polish?
Oh, yes, much better. It's a beautiful city in the springtime and the summertime. Cold winters, but the Queen of England, the Queen of Holland spent the warriors, Second World Warriors in Ottawa, and she sent them 1 million tulip bulbs every year.
Oh, wow.
And they had tulip growing everywhere, along the roads, along the lake, the rivers. It was beautiful.
And I'm sorry, how long were you? You were only up there like a year and they shut the operation down? Again, I guess you lived in civilian housing?
Yes. Worked in the bank building in civilian clothes.
You wore civilian clothes all the time you were up there?
Yeah.
Because of the kind of work you did or the relationship with the Canadian government?
I think it was a little of both. They didn't want us to tell them we were military. If anybody asked you where you worked, you tell them the agency, DCA agency. That was about all you could tell them.
What sort of security clearance did you have for all this stuff?
Top secret cryptid for a long time, and then the special RBI clearance,
Okay.
SBI they call it, Special Background Investigation.
Which would be even above the top secret crypto?
Yes.
Okay.
The reason we had to have that was NSA had circuits that came through us and we could see what they were talking about. And so, which I never seen anything that wasn't in the paper the next day anyway, but
Okay. Sacramento, what'd you do there?
Cleveland Air Force Base. Worked audited in tech control, that's computerized tech controls. They computerized, that everything is controlled by computers. We had to do crypto resets and all kind of other stuff, but
Were you an actual crypto operator?
no.
No. You just maintained the equipment.
We didn't maintain it, we checked it. If we had a problem, we went to spare or whatever, patch cords and stuff.
So if you told us anything about that, I suppose you'd have to shoot us.
Not really, just crypto itself is not classified. But
Okay.
Key cards and equipment and stuff like that is classified.
You still worked on a key card, punch card? Okay.
When I was in Newfoundland, they had some Newfies working in the attic, and one of them fell through the roof in the crypto room. He's hanging up there, and the guy's down there with a gun saying, "Don't let go." And drug him back up through the hole.
Wow. Let's see here. Having a little difficulty here. Okay, Fort Monmouth, another duty station.
Fort Monmouth.
Yeah, I thought you went to Fort, or did you go to school at Fort
I went to
Monmouth
Fort Monmouth was just for schooling,
in New Jersey?
yes.
Okay.
For about, it was 3 months, I think it was.
Was that a mixed service school?
There was 2 Air Force guys in my class. Some of the other career men were in different things there. Well, they had the ones that bought the equipment that we later got, and I wish they wouldn't have given it to us. But that's where we had to go to school.
Was there a little rivalry among the branches?
Not really, we got along pretty good.
Okay.
Some of the things they did weren't too. The commandant of the school asked me when I graduated what I thought of his school. He shouldn't have asked me.
Guess you were honest, huh?
Very.
Your time in Vietnam, the first time you went up there, you just went TDY, right?
Every time I went there was TDY.
Every time. Okay.
We couldn't stay over 180 days, or it was considered a permanent change of station. So they sent us out. We'd work for maybe 100 days or whatever, and they pulled us back to Clark.
You lived in a barracks, I guess, when you were over there at TDY?
Well, the first time I was over there, we lived in Hooches, the Japanese built in World War II.
Okay.
On a silver swamp, which was very nice. Wasn't very nice.
Now, if you, does that mean that you had Vietnamese to clean and cook and what have you?
Yes.
Okay. Was that considered pretty good duty, or?
Well, the first mob, the first mobile comm group, our commander called it a mob. But the commander before him didn't like it called a mob because that's the unruly people, he says, which we probably were at the time. But we would go in, take our equipment, mobile vans or whatever we had, whatever we needed at that base, go over, set them up, and work to whoever they're supposed to work to. And we'd do that till they got the permanent party people in, who was going to stay there for a year or whatever. And then we'd go back to Clark. And then something else come up, they opened another base, we'd go again.
Was most of the stuff you did, Merle, was most of it hardwired?
No.
No? Okay.
The vans were hardwired, but the phone was vans to wherever. We strung field wire down to Thailand for 7 miles from where we set up to where the main base was.
Remember that last question. When you were in Vietnam, you ever come under attack?
The bases did. Some of the bases we were on did.
You ever have any times where you ran for the bunker?
Oh, yeah. But one thing I'll say, they never hit the communication centers. Don't know why. I always said they was using them. That's the reason I could figure out. But they never bothered our equipment, never shot, launch grenades or that, or nothing but the comm equipment.
So when you lived in the barracks was somewhere removed from your equipment, really?
Yes.
Okay. So they would mortar or rocket the barracks, but for whatever reason the equipment...
Flight line or whatever, but...
you lived in World War II Japanese hooches the first time you went there. When you went later, did you live in military, U.S. military barracks?
Yeah, they were like Quonset huts, mostly.
And you had a bunker outside, I guess?
Mm-hmm.
When the siren, when whatever went off, y'all ran outside
First
into the...
boom.
Okay. Is that what it was, the first boom? Is that what got you going?
That got you going.
Get your adrenaline up a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
That ever happen to you at night?
Oh, yeah.
See, you say, oh yeah, as though it happens every day, Burl. It just, you know.
Well, it happened a lot, but we used to throw smoke bombs in the bunkers in the daytime to get the snakes and the bugs out, so if we had to get in at night, we felt fairly safe.
Snakes. Bugs are one thing. I don't know about having snakes in that bunker.
No, I don't want snakes anywhere.
So when you come out of that barracks and you're running you're running for your life, and you jump down in that bunker, There might be a snake down there?
Oh, yeah. Crate, bamboo viper, you never knew. Cobras.
Ah, never heard that before. Never heard that one before. And then you, well, later in your career, you went up to Thailand. You were stationed there, right?
No.
No?
TDY Thailand.
You're TDY there also?
Yeah.
Out of Clark?
Right.
Okay. I guess the Air Force had a lot of people that were that TDY in country?
Oh, yes. A lot of.
Why wouldn't they just send you over there as a permanent duty station?
Well, they did. That's who come in and took over after we set up everything and got it going.
Okay, so you were kind of not a pathfinder, but you were the first guys in your particular area of expertise. Okay.
First in, last out. That was our motto.
Was it really?
His first in because they ordered you in, you was the last out because you had to catch your own plane out there somewhere.
When's the last time you were in Vietnam?
Ooh,
During the war?
during the war, I left Clark. I left the mob in '67, in July of '67, so it was first part of '67, I guess.
Okay. So the buildup was going pretty strong by then,
Oh, yeah.
but you're not there in the 70s at all?
No.
Okay. Spent some time at Hickam. I would imagine that was pretty, you had the wife
was-
with you at Hickam?
That was cushy duty.
And how long was that?
4 years.
4 years. Live off base?
For a time till they got base housing available for me, and then I moved on base.
So you went to the beach on a regular basis?
Oh, yes.
Little fishing?
Bellows Air Station is the most beautiful beach in Oahu. It belongs to the Air Force. We had to pay $7 a night to rent the cabins.
$7 a night.
Body surfing was wonderful there too.
Did you have kids while you were there, Merle, or?
Yeah. My
And
boy
so the kids went with you?
had one. He was with me.
Okay. Did your child go to school in Hawaii then?
Yes.
Okay.
Kindergarten, first grade, I think it was he went in Hawaii.
In a military school or just go to Hawaiian?
Well, first kindergarten he went off base. We lived off base then. When we moved on base, they had the school on base there.
Okay. And you finished up at Andrews.
I
And
finished up
after-
at Scott Air Force Base.
Okay. I have Andrews here. When were you at Andrews?
That was between, let's see, where was I between Hawaii and the Philippines?
I would imagine Andrews was, that was maybe not the best place you ever went.
No, because when I first got there as an EA, they had to live off base.
Wow, I'll bet that was expensive, wasn't
It
it?
was very expensive.
And did the Air Force compensate for any of that?
No, just your base housing, regular housing thing. But,
So if you, well, say you were off base at Keesler in Mississippi and off base at Andrews, there was no difference in your pay or no difference in allowances? Wow.
no difference,
But there was a whale of a difference in rent.
yes. So I told the wife when we moved on base, we just got a $300 raise.
Well, good for you. You bet. After you got out, your time in Houston, and you were with NASA?
No, it was a contractor, Ford Aerospace.
Okay.
Part of the time, then a new company took over, Bendix.
But you did the same job,
Yeah,
okay? And you were there for 34 shuttle launches. Were you in a position where you could see the launch?
Big screen up there on,
Okay. The launch was at Canaveral?
Yep.
And you were in Houston?
Yeah.
Okay.
when they launched, they dumped a lot of water on the pad that deadened the noise. When they did that, the steam knocked out communication, so we had to shift to a station up north. When Challenger blew up, I was switching from one to the other, I don't know which direction it was. And somebody behind me said, "Look at that," and I looked up and all I seen was a fireball. And I said, "We lost them, there wasn't no doubt." They called and they called and they called, but I don't know why, it's a waste of time. That affected me more than Vietnam did, I think.
Back up a little. Well, yeah, let's back up a little bit. They pour water on the pad
Mm-hmm.
during the launch
Right after it left.
to deaden the sound. Wow.
That and
That's-
keep it from burning up the pad.
Yeah. That's all like out of a big reservoir, a big tank?
Yeah.
Wow. I'd never heard that, or, makes sense certainly.
Yeah.
And you were there, that's what they did, that's what they did. Wow.
Then solid boosters would drill holes in, in the pad and the ground underneath it for a long way.
Wow.
You gotta lift 150,000 pounds from a dead stop. You need a little power there. And that's without the payload, so it's more than that.
26 years, best experience.
Best experience was, I don't know. Hawaii was one of the best. And Philippines assignments were good. Filipino people are friendly people if you treat them right. A lot of military people had trouble with them because they didn't treat them right. But I was in every barrio and every place outside the base and other places and never had a problem with anybody.
The other side of that question, worst experience?
Worst experience? I would say Vietnam, just for the people that got tore up over there. At Clark Air Base, they brought all these casualties in by plane, and the hospital couldn't handle them, people they had working there. Well, they mostly called us, and we would go over and volunteer to help unload patients and so on and so forth. Because we went there all the time too, so it might be us on that thing the next time. But seeing those people tore up like they were, it was hard to take.
As an E8, and you were at E8 for how many years before you retired?
Let's see, about 4 years, I guess.
About 4? You have some administrative responsibilities? Do you have a
yeah.
group of people that, what was your impression of that part of the job?
Well, most of it was good. The young troops we got in our career field were pretty well educated and weren't hard to get along with. When I was at Andrews, I had 77 people under me. When I was in the Philippines the last time, I had 4 tech controls, so I forget how many people that was. Something like 116 or something like that. I was responsible for them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I spent a lot of time in the headquarters commander's office.
You spend some time at a local police station also?
No,
No?
they always got back to the base somewhere or other. 'Cause I told them I'm not coming to get you out of jail. You got in there, you can get yourself out.
Okay. Well, sir, thank you for your service. Thank you for coming down. We will get you, I'll call you, we're done, Milton, I'm sorry.